All right, third graders, today we are going to be reading chapter 5 in the HardyBoys, The Missing Mitt. Okay, this time I didn't zoom in, so if you're able to, you might want to zoom in, otherwise just listen. But for the most part, you should be able to see the words. Chapter 5, The 6 W's. While the rest of the bandits continued to search for Jason's glove, Joe and Frank went over to the bleachers. It was quiet there, so they could think. "What should we do?" asked Joe. "You know what Dad says. Start with the 6 W's. What, when, where, why, who, and how." Joe nodded, remembering that how always tripped him up as a W. But Frank had explained to him earlier it did end in a W. Frank pulled out a pen and a small spiral-bound notebook from his back pocket. He wrote the words down in big letters on the paper. What? W-H-A-T ? Jason's lucky mitt. It was a regular brown baseball glove, a little larger than most. It was old and beat up looking. "Do you think someone could have taken it by accident?" asked Joe. "Like maybe they thought it was theirs?" Frank thought for a second. "No," he said. "It's bigger than any of our mitts, and remember, it had winner stitched on it. As soon as someone saw that, they would know." Joe took the notebook and drew the mitt, complete with the word winner on it. Then they would have something to show witnesses. W-H-E-N ? Win. "Hey, Jason," called Joe. Jason had stopped picking through the pile of bats and balls. He was sitting by himself on the other side of the bleachers. He still looked angry. When Joe called his name, he came running over. "Are you guys going to find my mitt?" asked Jason excitedly. "We're trying," said Joe, "but we need your help. Do you remember when you last had it?" "Well," said Jason, "I don't know exactly. I got here around 8:30, and I guess I put my bag down right away, but I knew everyone would want to touch the lucky mitt, so I kept that with me. Then when it was time to practice, I threw it in with the rest of my stuff right before you guys arrived." "When was that?" Frank looked at his watch. 8:59 exactly, he said. Then he wrote 8:59. Jason threw the mitt into the pile. "Okay," said Joe. "And when did you find out the mitt was missing?" "Right after Coach Quinn called a break. Mitt discovered missing at about 10 o'clock. Frank wrote in the book. "Did anything strange happen in between those times?" asked Frank. "No," said Jason. "We were practicing, and then the Jupiters showed up. I saw Connor standing around our stuff, and after that my mitt was gone. I'm sure he stole it." "Jupiters arrived at 9:30, wrote Frank. "I think Connor stole my mitt because he knows I'm better than he is," said Jason, getting angry again. "Are you guys going to catch him?" "We don't know. He stole it," said Frank, "but we're going to catch whoever did." Frank didn't want to assume that Connor had taken Jason's mitt, but it wasn't looking good for the Jupiters' first baseman. W-H-E-R-E ? Where? "We need to look at the crime scene again," said Joe. "Now that everybody's back to practicing, maybe we can find some clues." The game was still on, so the Jupiters and the bandits were all getting ready, except for Jason. Frank and Joe walked back over to the place where Jason had last seen his mitt. But so many people had touched things, it was impossible to tell if anything was out of order. There were a million footprints everywhere and no suspicious trails or anything. Frank and Joe walked around the pile, each in a different direction, to make sure that they didn't miss anything. "Did you find anything?" asked Joe, when they had walked all the way around to the other side. "Just this," said Frank, holding out a large stick. "It was mixed up with all the gear." "Is it random?" asked Joe. "But do you think it has anything to do with Jason's mitt?" "I don't know," said Frank, "but I'm writing it down anyway, just in case. It is random." "Found at scene. Gear, footprints, one large stick," wrote Frank in his notebook. Oh, I forgot to turn the page, sorry. "We're not getting anywhere," said Joe. He was right. They had nothing. W-H-Y ? Why? "We know that the person who took Jason's mitt did it on purpose," said Frank, "because they couldn't have mistaken the lucky mitt for theirs." "Right," said Joe. "Maybe the Jupiters would do anything to win." "Is there any reason anyone else would have taken it?" asked Frank. "Everyone on the team loves Jason," said Joe, "and we all want to win this game. I can't think of any reason someone else would have stolen the mitt. Can you?" Frank shook his head. Nothing else made sense. "Wait," said Frank. What if someone wanted to sell it? I bet they could get a lot of money for a myth that used to belong to Winnie Winner Prime. That's true. So it's either Connor Hound or anyone. We're not getting any closer. WHO question mark. Who? That was the big question. The more evidence they found, the more it seemed that Connor or one of the other Jupiters were guilty. Connor had the opportunity and for a reason for doing it, but they couldn't be sure. They needed a witness or solid proof. That was what their dad had taught them. You need proof, not just a good suspicion, he'd said. Joe and Frank had hoped that they could find some proof before the game began at 9:30. Time was running out. HOW question mark. How? Good question. But they wouldn't know the answer to this one until they found out who had taken the mitt. Suddenly a voice broke in on them. Hey, Frank! Hey, Joe! Shouldn't you be practicing? Before they could look to see who it was, someone tackled Frank from behind. Woof! Frank was knocked to the ground in a heap. Oh, I left you at a good spot. And that is the end of the chapter. Now go to Google Classroom and you will have to wait to see what happens in chapter 6.